My wife and I married at the age of 22. We were high school sweethearts. We got along super well. It felt like we belonged together. Our parents and friends thought so. Two things that I struggled with were impatience and control. Whenever I had to explain something to my wife, or whenever something wouldn't happen the way I thought it should, I would freak out. I wasn't always like that. It was only when I couldn't help it because I was working on something or anxious for something to happen. One of these times was when I was working on animating a cartoon I'd been working on for weeks. Suddenly, the program I use crashed. I couldn't get my computer to work right, which escalated into having to wipe the corrupt hard drive. I don't know what happened. All I know is I lost my mind. I didn't have the most recent work backed up anywhere, which I know was my fault. But I expected my computer to continue working just fine because it was relatively new. I was upset. I was yelling and started throwing things. I made a fool out of myself. There were a few other things that made me behave immature in the past couple of months, but I won't get into those now. My wife was sick of me. I knew it. I could tell, but she didn't want to comfort me or help me through it. She was ignoring me pretty hard. I finally caved in and asked her to do me a favor by coming along to the repair shop with me. She was the one who introduced me to the repair shop and told me she had been there a few times when she had computer issues at the shop. There was an extremely buff nerd who knew exactly how to fix my computer. She kindly asked him where the bathroom was, so he took the computer with him to show her where it was in the back. He said he'd update me in 30 minutes. I watched them disappear together, and it was a little weird. But I expected my wife back in 5 minutes or less. 20 minutes later. My patience grew thin, so I decided to head back there to see what was going on. When he saw me, he immediately became defensive, asking what I was doing there. I told him I was just checking in on my wife to see how she was. He quickly answered by saying she was fine and told me to go back to my seat. I ignored him and continued to stand there waiting for my wife. What I saw afterwards was absolutely shocking. Just as I was about to go check on my wife, she came out of the bathroom and it appeared her shirt was not buttoned up all the way. When she saw me, her face instantly went into a state of panic. I knew something had happened between them, and I told him I was going to tell his boss to check the cameras, and he said there weren't any in this area, with a slight smirk on his face. So without missing a beat, I punched him. I looked at my wife furiously, then walked out of the building without the computer. She then came running after me, saying she was sorry, and that wouldn't happen again. She sensed something just came over her and she didn't mean anything by this. She was frustrated because I was frustrated. And when he suggested it, she just did it. She said she only loved me and needed me because I was her soulmate. I told her I thought she was mine too, but apparently not. She ruined our marriage just for a few seconds of pleasure. I told her we were done and she needed to call someone for a ride and a place to stay and a future wife, because I wouldn't be any of those to her. She chased after the car, crying and screaming. She dialed someone and my phone started ringing. I ignored all her calls and informed our families what happened. One day, she sent me an apology text, telling me she wanted to come clean some more and asked for forgiveness. She mentioned that her and the computer technician had been flirting with each other for quite some time now. It started off a couple months ago when she first went there to get her computer fixed. She mentioned how he was very charming and pleasant to be around. She said she didn't expect that things would escalate the way they did and didn't know how to put an end to it. The reality was harsh. I woke up with a wife and went to bed without one. I didn't think today would be the day she slept with another man. My family's support was incredible. My sister came over to clean and make me food. My best friend came over to stay for a few days and brought his dog. I adopted a dog after this because I realized how amazing they were to have. My wife stayed with her parents who heard what happened and couldn't believe it. They told her she only had 1 month to stay, and if she didn't figure out some respectable option, then she would be gone. They held true to their word, because when my wife tried to go stay with a computer nerd who was fired because I told his boss her parents didn't accept her back. Turned out the computer nerd couldn't afford for her to live with him, so they broke things off. She had to go find a female roommate to live with and pay rent while struggling on her own. I couldn't believe the support I received and how everything sucked for my ex and AP. Her mistake led me to become stronger on my own and realize I had to stop being so impatient and controlling. I should only be grateful. I am so sorry your wife cheated on you in a computer shop of all places while you stood in the lobby. I can't believe she was so despicable. I'm happy you went back there when you knew something wasn't right. You certainly did not deserve this sudden heartbreak, for apparently no reason. And I'm glad you had support while you made an effort to move forward in life. Your ex and EP started down the hard road of consequences and shame. It'll be extremely difficult for them to repair the trust they lost for all the people in her life. How could they expect anyone to remain loyal or respectable when they were both so willing to throw it all away? In a moment. Any trouble they have finding support or trust in relationships is a struggle they deserve until they can look at themselves and figure out why this happened. I am extremely proud of you for being unwilling to sweep this under the rug and fighting from the moment of betrayal for a better future for yourself. It's wonderful that you found peace, strength, patience, and a willingness to go with the flow. There are plenty of fish in the sea, and they'll be there waiting for you when you're ready to fish. I wish you and your dog ultimate happiness in life. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife, 40, and I, 43. We're married for 12 years. We never felt ready for children. And I guess that's a good thing because of the story I'm about to tell you. Our house unexpectedly flooded, so during the repairs, my older brother, 48, was kind enough to let us stay in his house with him and his dogs. He was kind of like a doomsday prepper and didn't believe in marriage or commitment. My wife was fascinated by his lifestyle and admired all the hard work he put into maintaining his self-sufficient farm. I think she was tired of living the usual life and just needed some change. Well, instead of talking to me about it and making a good change, she made a change without asking me a change that would ruin her marriage. I was sleeping in the guest room when I woke up in the early morning hours to find my wife gone the night before. We all drank and sat talking by a fire. We've been staying here for 5 days at this point, and we didn't know how long our stay was going to be. I started tiptoeing through the house, trying not to wake up my brother, who was a light sleeper in the event of an intruder or emergency. My brother was already awake. His dogs were lined up at the crack of his door smelling and tend to deduce what was going on inside. I heard a quiet movement, but before I knocked, I thought it would be smart to see if I could see under his door because I heard some noises. I could see his bare feet and legs up against the side of the bed, shifting his weight in a way that meant sex. I felt myself knock on the door. As I watched underneath, I saw my wife's feet drop down in a hurry and step into the nightgown that lay on the floor. I could hear her whispering, "My God," because she probably didn't know how they were going to explain themselves. I heard my brother opening the many door locks and he greeted me. I was standing now and he was sweating. He looked really nervous. I think it was much harder for him to face me after having sex with my wife than he thought. He couldn't look me in the eye, and all he said was he was showing my wife the closets full of guns and non-perishable food. I punched him pretty hard. He fell back and grabbed his face. I told him he wasn't my brother anymore. Then I looked at my wife and told her she wasn't my wife anymore. I said I saw them under the door, and they each had complete disregard for me. I left to return home and informed both families of this betrayal. It was extremely difficult, but after I told my mom, things instantly became easier. She cried with me and understood how upset I was. She said she was going to disarm my brother, which gave me the idea to call my email. She didn't want to believe it, but she did offer my apologies and gave me some advice. Moments later, my wife called me. She said her mother was disowning her because I told her what happened. I asked her if she thought she deserved this, and she was quiet. She got bitter and said, since I turned her mother against her, she'll just keep my brother instead of me. I laughed and said my brother wouldn't keep her for more than a month. Turns out, my brother kicked her out 17 days later. He said he felt horrible for what he'd done to me, and it took him all this time to realize he would only ever see her as my wife. He said he hated himself for doing this and never wanted to commit to a woman in the first place. He left a voicemail with his whole account of the breakup because he wanted me to forgive him. My wife also continued to beg and plead for forgiveness. I might forgive my brother, but it will take me while I'm happily divorced and living in the house that we're painted and remodeled. It looks completely different, and I know the woman I used to know would have enjoyed this very much, but it's not hers to enjoy anymore. I've had lots of company over and even hosted parties, which is something I never used to do. It's still very painful to know what my wife did to me by doing my best to take it day by day and focus on other things in life. I am so proud of you for handling this the way you did. What a wonderful way to spend your time and improve your future by changing and renovating the home you live in. You helped yourself to get through a rough, unexpected change and come out of it a better person. You sought out support from loved ones, which is also a very important thing to do. Anyone going through something so dramatic should try to relieve or distract their mind from the emotional torment. A spouse disloyalty is never anyone's fault but their own. It's each person's job to maintain honest communication and always continue choosing their spouse as the one they love and are intimate with. Your ex made a terrible, shocking mistake by sneaking into your brother's bedroom as he slept. She knew the marriage was over as soon as she was caught, and the only reason she had the nerve to be so cocky is because she thought your brother would love and keep her. I am so glad consequences prevailed, and there was no chance of her living happily ever after. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck in life. Going forward, thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.